Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel, Collinati. Today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in the first half of February. I think I only have 5 things to talk about, but they're all really good in different ways, so I am excited about this. Let's get into it. First up is The Heart Principle by Helen Hoang. I believe this is the last in this romance series. It began with The Kiss Quotient and The Bride Test. And The Kiss Quotient is basically the romance novel that got me into reading romance on a regular basis. I was looking for things that were like that book. So I have been very much looking forward to the other books in this series and have had mixed experiences with them. Like The Bride Test it's just not very memorable for me, but The Heart Principle really surprised me with how immediately invested I was in reading this. I compulsively read it over about 2 days. I didn't want to do anything but read this book. And why? It's kind of interesting because I don't think of this book as being about people falling in love with each other and a happily ever after. That does happen, but I viewed it mostly as a story about mental health and dealing with family and overcoming trauma or major life experiences and figuring out who you are after your whole view of yourself has changed. And that, I think, is why I found the story so compulsively readable. So this is about 2 people, Anna, who is a violinist who is kind of unable to make music. She's going through some issues, and then her longtime boyfriend says, I want to be in an open relationship so I can sleep with other people before I marry you. And she's like, okay. And then she decides to have rebound sex with this guy named Quan, who has been mentioned in the previous books. He has recently dipped his toes back into the world of dating and, sleeping with people after having had cancer. They meet. They have interests in common, they're good for each other, but the whole book is basically them trying to have sexy times, and it just doesn't work very well because they have things they're working through. So then it becomes very much about the state of Anna's mental health, what her family's treatment of her has done to her, especially when she realizes that she is probably autistic, and that completely changes her perception of how her family has dealt with her problems over her life. And then Quan, of course, is trying to reach her and help her with this. He understands what she's going through in a way that other people don't. It was a really good story in terms of that. And I'm glad that I had read The Bride Test before this one, because I think if I had come into this really expecting it to be really like the romantic story in The Kiss Quotient, I would have been disappointed. And instead I approached this as a story that was going to be about pretty much everything but that, and it made it just work for me a lot better. So I'm really glad I read this, and kind of sad that I think the series is over, but should Helen Hoang come out with anything else, I will read it in a heartbeat. Next, I did read some of Ross Gay's poetry. I read his collection, The Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, and once again, I really enjoy the things that Ross Gay talks about, just the connections that he notices between joy and delight and these little quotidian moments and nature. I don't know how he sees these things, but I just read his work and I think this is a real cool dude who's very observant and loves people, loves nature. I like him as a person. Anyway, this poetry collection it touches on a lot of the same topics that I really loved from his essay collection, The Book of Delights. So that's what I really enjoyed about it. As poetry though, a lot of this collection are poems that are in that format of the really long skinny column of text across multiple pages. It's 3 words on every line. There's probably a word for what this type of poem is, that format. I don't get it. It's a style of modern poetry that I just don't understand. I literally have a hard time understanding poems that are formatted that way because they usually don't have punctuation. It's multiple long sentences that are just chopped into these very short lines. And I find myself trying to process the words on every line and figure out why these words, why do you put the line breaks here? And then I can't comprehend what the entire poem is saying. It's very strange, and I really struggled with that in this collection. That being said, there were some poems that were in a more like traditional format, longer lines, more expansive text on the page, and I really liked those. So it was a mixed bag in terms of the types of poems, but like I said, basically the sentiments, what he chooses to write about, what he notices, I really enjoy. So I think I might like him best as an essayist for his prose, but if I were to ever come across another one of his poetry collections, I would try to read it. Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. This is the sequel to the novella Silver in the Wood, which I read in January and I really, really enjoyed. I think my opinion is pretty similar to a lot of other people's in that I also really enjoyed Drowned Country. It was really good, but it wasn't quite as good for me as Silver in the Wood, and that probably has a lot to do with the perspective shift. Silver in the Wood is from Tobias's perspective, and then this one is from Silver's, and I actually think that Silver is a little bit more of a complex, complicated person that I don't love every aspect of him, and that makes him very interesting to me, whereas I feel like Tobias is a little bit of a simpler person. So, you know, in Drowned Country, we learn a little bit more about Silver's perhaps selfishness, that he has lied, he has made mistakes, he's paying the consequences of that. He and Tobias are not currently together. And I kind of liked how the story went in that direction. The bulk of the story, though, is that Silver has been moping in his house, and then his mother comes back after like 2 years and is like, so I need you to be bait for a vampire who really likes pretty young men. And he's like, of course, mother. And then it turns into this whole story about like fairyland, but not your typical fairyland. And I liked it a lot. Like, I think what I have most appreciated about this and Silver in the Wood is that Emily Tesh takes some things that feel very familiar, very traditional, and she does this surprising twist on it, and it's just like, nope, we're not gonna go in the typical direction, we're gonna do this other thing instead. And it's very fresh, while at the same time, like, giving me the feels of the traditional fantasy mythology thing that I like. And I think that's a really fine line to balance on, like to do the well-known thing while also doing something different with it. So super enjoyed this. I kind of wish there was more, but this is also just a good duology that stands on its own, so there you go. Once again, we'll read anything else that Emily Tesh comes out with now. I think she's got a book coming out in 2023, and I will be looking forward to it. Next up is How to Be a Good Creature by Cy Montgomery. This is a short memoir. It's 13 tales of animals that have been in Cy Montgomery's life, her pets or animals that she's met on her travels, and what she learned from her relationships with them. It's very much like a feel-good story about learning good lessons, I guess. It was lovely and sweet, and I really enjoyed reading it. I don't have much more to say about it than that, though. I also really enjoyed the illustrations. I think the illustrator is Rebecca Green, and I think I've read other books that she's illustrated. I recognize her style, and that the illustrations add a lot to this as well. It's just a really beautiful book about beautiful subject matter. Then there is The Best of All Possible Worlds by Karen Lord, which is one of my favorite books I've read so far this year. This book I have been meaning to read for over 7 years, guys. I have owned the ebook for like 5. I finally read it, and I just freaking loved it. In fact, I think I need to do a whole video just getting all my gushing out about why I enjoyed this book so much. So I will attempt to do that, maybe like not right now, but in the near future. Because yeah, like I was a bit surprised how amusing I found this book to be. Like, it made me laugh, and I enjoyed like the emotional content, the characters' relationships, how they dealt with the situation, the protagonist's voice, like her narration style. Just, I loved all of this, and it feels a bit strange to say that because the book's basis is basically a genocide and tragic events that people have gone through. But it's also like so hopeful in many ways. It's about like finding the people that you belong with and that you love, and almost like a slow burn romance. I loved this. So I'll talk more about this book in hopefully the near future, but the short version is go read this. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, I do know that there is a sequel. I'm not entirely sure that I want to read it though, because it's very different. I know it's a very different book, and part of the reason, like probably the major reason why I loved The Best of All Possible Worlds is because of the narrator's voice, and she is not the narrator of the sequel. So I don't know. I'm not gonna run out and read the sequel right away, but you can change my mind if you want to try. And finally, The Last Quintista by Donna Barba Higuera. This book really surprised me. I think that I expected it to be like young adult fantasy. I didn't realize it was actually science fiction, and then I turned out to really like it. So this story is about a young girl, I think she's about 12 or 13, who is going with her family on like this multi-generational colony ship to another planet because Earth is about to be destroyed by a comet. So they are very quickly going onto the ship, they're being put into like cryo sleep, and then she is woken up and finds out that her family is gone. It's hundreds of years in the future, and there's like this very strange radical political sect called the Collective that has taken over control of the ship, and they're basically brainwashing and controlling everybody, and it's all like everything is for the Collective, and they're literally waking up children who were in cryosleep and brainwashing them and using them as like minions. And for some reason, it doesn't work on her. She still has her memories and everything, and so she is trying to find a way to get away from the Collective and to help some of the other children there. What helps her so much is stories. She wants to be a storyteller, and she tells many of the traditional stories that her abuelita had told her. And it's so interesting about like the power of stories in this. It is very emotionally powerful for the character. It is her connection to important people in her life. It is how she forms connections with other people by telling them stories and inspiring them and teaching them in that way. So I really loved the way that storytelling was used in this and how important it was, even in a society where storytelling is completely unknown. Like it connects to people on this very deep level. Like humans love stories and will recognize the power of them even if you've never heard one before. So I love this aspect of it. I will say that as science fiction, I had to take a lot of this book with a grain of salt. I think that the premise of like the comet destroying Earth is very hand-wavy. There's a lot of like biological, botanical stuff going on with being on an alien planet, and I felt that was also kind of hand-wavy. The timelines here with the science are just ludicrous, but it was very easy for me to actually just push that stuff aside and just enjoy it as a science fiction story as well and not take that too seriously, because I also kind of liked the twist this had on that usual sci-fi trope of the colony ship and like political rivalry and stuff on these generation ships, but it's from a child's perspective in this case, which I thought was really different. And yeah, I also really enjoyed that. So not perfect science fiction, but it was good. It was done well. So that is it for everything I read in the first half of February. I seem to be reading quite a bit this month, so hopefully I will have enough to do a proper part 2 of my February wrap up in a week or so. We will see. I have been reading far less this year. I think I've commented on this a little bit, but I have been reading just like one good book after another, and that has been really exciting. So let me know if you have also read any of these books, or if you want to, please leave me a comment down below. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back to talk to you again soon. And until then, bye.